Good evening, welcome to FMA Discussion. This is episode 467, and tonight is theme oriented. Our guests tonight are Rich Parsons and Chris Chiu. They've both been on before. I'll reference their past interviews in the comment section. But tonight, we're going to be discussing if you're asked to teach a system, but there was no documentation, where's the responsibility fall or carry out as far as the art is concerned? And what problems can that lead to? What can be misinterpreted, misconstrued? And that's stuff we're going to be talking about tonight. And big thank you to Rich who came up with this. I forget what episode this came out of, but perhaps he remembers. I'm starting to lose sight of these. But at any rate, without further ado, here they are. We got Master Rich Parsons. You know, and that new up and coming kid. I don't know. I think he's out of Florida or something. I feel bad for him, so I figure we'll bring him on and I don't know, let him talk. You know.
Okay.
Oh, he's got the moving. So what do you think? Kind of follow him.
That's how we're playing this game, huh, Uncle Mean Dean? All right, I see how it is.
All right, wait, Chris, what do you?
That's right. I have a mobile camera mount.
You can't do that to the elderly. Where is he?
Sorry, your visions are getting blurred in your senility.
Jeez.
I'm just gonna see a punch get thrown through the camera into my face.
Where's Uncle Bruce when we need him?
He's trying to make a Facebook right now.
So, thank you guys for coming on and doing this. The test went really well. I'm excited. I think this is a good subject, and we'll see what the comments come in. We got folks already jumping in. We got GM Ron Saturno. We got Eric O'Brien, another Floridian. Rich is here. And Chris
Eric is your troublemaker.
Who's trying to duck me from coming on here.
Ooh.
And Norman Taylor. So, and hey, Amok. Rich, so what initiated this idea? What prompted it? What was the inspiration?
Oh, some personal information myself, but also I think it was one of Renee's episodes where when Renee was on, there was some discussions about groups, people doing their own things, some people being asked, some people not, just off doing it. And so I posed the question of, hey, if you were asked by the most senior of your group, organization, or what, it'd be to continue and carry on the art, but there's only verbal witnesses and nothing else was said, like, hey, everybody follow this person or these two people or three people, right? So what does that mean? And I'm sure it means everything to everyone individually, but I thought it would be a good discussion point.
No, and I think the test run was evidence of that. And then we figured, we thought it'd be neat to kind of bring Chris on because maybe he can give perspective from a younger person's lens, and plus he's kind of in a situation, modern East, but also under his father's faction. I'm there. And was it episode 55? No, it was definitely not. That episode was no. And Chris says he'll be. Oh, I see Chris in New Hampshire. Okay, in April. Oh wow. Okay. So Chris, what do you think overall on this?
I do think it's an interesting conversation to have, and I think that this type of a conversation needs to be had more, especially now that we're in the generation of technology and computers and archives. Like, this stuff needs to be cemented before it's just forgotten about, and not forgotten about in the sense that this content will always exist, but were the discussions had at the time of them needing to be had. And now we can do these types of conversations, or people can document things. It's easy to do the type of conversation that people are needing to have, which weren't had, 40, 60, 80 years ago. So I think it's a great discussion that we look at not necessarily finding who the successor is or who's the heir of things, but just so that people can be left with a better understanding after the guy meaning the head of the organization, the guy meaning the creator of the organization, ultimately passes.
Hmm.
So once you guys said, "Hey, you should come onto this," I was like, "Yes, please. This is a fun conversation, so let's do it."
Yeah. So Rich, what are some of the issues? In other words, this can go a couple different ways because just by the way we're looking at, like a small group, a garage, or we're looking at maybe a secondary, tertiary program in an actual school, a whole faction. So, what do you think are some of the potential issues when somebody is, I guess, like for instance, a student is put in charge, but of course, no documentation, and then we get into the seniors. Was there somebody more senior, or all that subjectivity?
Right. For those who may have started before someone, for those who may have started and stopped, or slowly trained versus aggressively trained, um, they might believe, well, where's my spot? Why don't I get my turn? Right.
Mm.
You have those who are saying, hey, I think I'm just as good as them. And they might be, but they also may not have tested themselves. Right. Um, Either on the floor for teaching or in a sparring match or anything to those effects. And then you're just going to have some people who are going to say, nah, I just don't like Rich, or I just don't like the guy that they're going to put in charge. So I'm going to go do my own thing. And with a clear designation, then the people who are caught in the middle in the gray area, they can make their own educated choices. Otherwise, it's a he said, or they said discussion point. And then people can feel betrayed or frustrated or angry, and then they just might quit the arts. And that's something I don't want to see. It's because I would prefer people be able to train, even if it's with somebody that's not me or I'm associated with. But if they're happier training with somebody, then yes, please go train. But do it based upon data and education and good choices. That's all.
Yeah, as opposed to maybe just leaving just because they didn't like the person that was put in there, or whatever the circumstances may be.
Or they believe one person and not the other. They accuse you of, yeah.
What is Chris? What would you like to? Anything you'd like to chime in on that?
No, I think that I definitely can understand where the frustration would lie, especially like as someone who is not, I mean, going to modern Ernest as the example, just because I know something that we all understand pretty decently, the history of it all. I joined it long after the quote unquote, actually not even quote unquote, just the passing of Professor Praisas. So I wasn't around for guys like Master Parsons, my dad, GM Brian, GM Dan, all those guys who were around at the time of his passing to see the fallout of it. So
Hmm.
like I can only imagine, especially back in that time where it was so much more harder. I'm guessing it was a lot harder to stay communicated with and connected to each other back then. It was 2001 is when he passed, so it's not like it was a Stone Age, but you know, I can only
Phone calls
imagine
were
the,
made. People said don't show up. Phone calls were
so,
made. Some people were told they could show up.
yeah,
Emails were ignored for what few that was available.
Yes.
Um, and then information on the internet kept changing daily.
yeah.
So,
And I know my dad, for one, because I heard a story that there was an email sent out to everybody. And granted, my dad's memory is fuzzy, but he was like, Chris, I never got an email from anybody. I never saw anything. And I was like, well, Dad, you also told them to leave you alone. So that might be why you never got anything from them. But I can definitely see why this type of a situation or this type of conflict would have sucked to be around,
yes.
because all you guys wanted to do was just train. All you guys wanted to do was just have fun and continue sharing Professor's art. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh well, we've got the West Coast guys, we've got the Midwest guys, we have the Northern guys, the Southern crew, we have the crew in the Philippines, we've got the IMAF Philippines, the Modern East Tappy Tappy Federation. There's the market. There's like 15 different organizations,
Yeah.
and who's in charge of it then? Like,
And,
even with documentation like the will that was made, there were still 25 people listed as supposed to be the runners of it. So
Yeah.
And this wasn't directed directly at modern East only. This was directed
no,
at any type of system where there's an error non-apparent.
Mm.
So if you don't have an apparent error or a designated error, you don't have multiple generations where things have been passed down to the next most senior rank, where there's a tradition of that, then it's those initial steps that need to be done and put in place to carry the art and the knowledge forward.
Just back to the communication thing back then, and not that obviously modern East is the only example we're going to use tonight,
yeah,
but I look how big the organization was then, and you guys know better than me as far as the number of schools he was involved in there. But
which organizations was he involved in?
yeah, and so when upon his passing, and then you got a communication problem, who's in charge and all that. I imagine there was a period of time there where it was just, quite frankly, a mess. I mean, like who was going to come around to the schools, who was going to kind of oversee quality control per se. It doesn't sound like any of that was designated. If he was in fact the one that was coming there, were people kind of stepping into spots that maybe perhaps shouldn't have been, but they were filling a void, maybe selfishly or unselfishly. I mean, so I think that can bring up a bunch of issues where people get maybe overzealous and avoid of a situation, and they coming in and maybe perhaps they weren't the person that was deemed fit or even on a list per se. So is that stuff that has happened, or what do we do?
Yeah. So positively, you could have people honestly trying to step forward and do the right thing. You could also have people who are stepping forward and trying to cement their position and calling you a liar and saying, no, you don't have any rank because you never tested in front of them, right? Because therefore, if you hadn't tested in front of them at a specific location, then it's not a valid rank, even though it may have come from the founder of the system, right? And then making statements that just weren't valid because many people had been promoted outside of a camp. But that being said, yes, there's also the Remy who thought he was going to recover, always positive, always a fighter, and he could have put people in place that would have been easy to take the authority back from and not necessarily affect the overall organization, right? That's an option. I don't know. I'm not a mind reader. I'm just putting everything on the table for that. But that being said, to me, any organization like at Parker's, where many of the seniors split and create their own organizations, some of the JKD split after Bruce Lee. You've got people doing their own thing, which is always going to happen. There's always going to be at least one or two of those. But we also want to make sure that if we can avoid the miscommunication, avoid the conflict, be transparent, set up a committee, as some mentioned during the trial run for Pikiti Tercia with Uncle Bill. Or as in Tim Hartman's case, where he named 3 people to find the next leader of the system if something was to happen to him. So his organization, I should say. So having something in place, something documented, something agreed upon is good. Now, does it have to be published to everybody in the world outside the organization? No. But everybody within the organization should know that there is a plan and what the plan is.
Anything you want to add, Chris?
I'm going to give a story because when I told my dad about this particular episode and he was really excited about the theme, he gave me a story to potentially bring up if it was organic, and I think it'll tie into what we're talking about. And I know, Dean, I talked to you about small circle jujitsu and Professor Wally J. I know Master Parsons, you were around for that, for Professor Wally a little bit, I'm sure. Um, Before Professor Wally's death, my dad was around for these. My dad was a personal student of Professor Wally's and followed him around the world and was very committed to small circle at one point. Before Professor Wally's passing, there was a public statement that was known amongst the organization, just the small circle group, that there was going to be a committee of 5 people. There's going to be a council, so to speak, of 5 people, and it was public, it was documented, and there was evidence to back it up. People were there for this event. But then, don't know how many years in between, or it might have just been a year or more, I don't know. At some point, Professor Wally J made another public statement in front of a bunch of people at an event or a seminar or what have you, that he then listed his son, Professor Leon J, to be the head of the organization. So you had 2 documented public events saying what was going to happen after his death.
Right.
The first one being there was going to be a council of people. The second one saying it was going to go to his son. So for me personally, go ahead, sir.
If he's in sound mind, the second one is what I believe. If he names his son and says he's going to be it, if he's not at the right level, then the council should be the ones that help gets him there.
So actually, he abolished the council, is what I understood after.
And that's fair too. He's still in charge.
It's his system. He created it. So
yeah.
And that's where I think that you can have, it needs to be public. It needs to have people around to see it and to witness it, regardless of whether you're going council, heir apparent, whatever have you.
Yep.
I'm not a fan of as much as I respect the privacy and the trainings of private students these guys may have. If you're going to come out in the woodworks and make claims like, well, I was told by so-and-so to be the guy. Well, if no one was around to see it, I'm sorry, I'm not going to believe you.
Yeah.
That's just me. Like, I respect you as whatever you are, cool. But like, just because he signed it on a napkin while you had him over at your house doesn't make you the guy.
Yeah. No. Well, yeah. Without any visible proof. And I'm just catching up on the comments, and more folks are jumping in. We have David Parker. We have Maynard. What's the topic? So Maynard, the topic is having people teach whether they should be in charge or not, due to basically head of the system, dying, and there was really no delegation of who's doing what. So sometimes you are thrown into the role, or sometimes they maybe for selfish reasons they jumping into a void when really they weren't supposed to be. So that's kind of everything we're covering tonight on that. And furthermore, how to avoid situations like this when the head of a system dies and there's been no error made, and all kinds of issues that can arise from that. And we got Renee, Dean. Sure.
I got a question to throw at this as well.
Sure.
Because, and if you haven't read, again, I'm going to just keep tying back to modern days because it's the easiest topic for me to speak on. My dad was in the will, but my dad was only a 3rd degree black belt under Professor Parsons at the time of the will. So does rank play a factor in this, so to speak? Yeah. Does official rank play a factor? Because, people knew who my dad was, and he was only a 3rd degree. So then clearly, and he was in the will with, Datsus, he was in the will with Masters of Tappy Tappy and higher ranks. So then you look at it like, does the rank itself matter, or does the person matter more? And I think that's another issue to look at, because some people say, well, I'm higher ranked, so I should be so-and-so. I don't care what rank you were if you're going to be a terrible person about it.
I think rank does matter to a point. But the board is the board, right? Mm-hmm. Underneath that, you've got the president of the company, right? So if you have one person who's at the highest rank, then there's a president. If there's a bunch of people at that highest rank, then you've got a bunch of either, co-presidents or vice presidents who are all reporting to the board, right? So, and then the board may choose a CEO, right, to run the board, and that may or may not be chosen based upon rank. It could be based upon skill set. So, hey, this person's organizational skills are awesome, and they're needed to execute this. Whereas in this person over here, who is one of the top and is currently active, might be our technical director or chief technical officer, and they might go out and be the one who's in charge of quality control and moving forward, right? So as an example, not saying that's what should have happened, but as an example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no. I think here's yeah, I all this is gonna make it this really interesting because there's the rank component. Maybe there's a skill set component. Maybe like Chris was alluding to his father, maybe he wasn't the highest ranked, but he was just liked. Maybe he resonated with people, and Remy saw that. You know what I mean? And for instance, so here's Maynard's comment: the most skilled and has the deepest knowledge of the art should inherit regardless of the rank. And some people definitely feel that way as well, and I'm not saying that's wrong. I mean, so one of the things, in absence of a written will or anything of that matter, then it's open for interpretation who's doing what, and perhaps who's the most aggressive or.
So Elvis Presley, as an eighth degree, should have been in charge.
Elvis.
I mean, as an eighth degree under Parker, right? he should have been one of them in charge.
It would have been a party.
I'm just saying, so rank alone is not the only thing.
Yeah. He was an eighth degree under Parker? Really?
That's what I've heard.
Okay. Wow.
I believe I saw a certificate, but that was on pictures on the internet. So,
yeah.
All right. But where I'm going with it though is, as that is an example, how active was he? Was he a great ambassador? Yes. Did he deserve the ambassador recognition? Probably, yeah. But would he be the same person that most people would choose to be the technical? Yeah. So while I think rank is a very, very important piece, right? And it should be considered for various reasons. I don't think it's the only reason when you're looking at the leadership of an organization.
Yeah.
When
because today
testing, yes.
Yeah, I mean, look at all the variables sometimes the head does. Now we have this whole social media platform, and and online students and this and that, websites to run. So this guy could be incredibly skilled, but maybe couldn't lead, anything for that matter. Rank doesn't mean skill or knowledge. Rank is for administrative purposes, in my opinion.
And if the system's set up like that, I agree. That's a good point.
GM Ray, I have lineage, and who's next in line? I sleep better. Rank versus title, which is most important?
So the title
depends on what each one matters, or what the purpose is of each one.
Oh, you mean I thought he was talking the title fight. So you put him in the room, and the one that walked out had the title and won.
He's the winner. He's the one who matters the most.
That's pretty. So we could tie that in here. Rank and title. I mean, obviously, this kind of fits in what we're talking about.
I think we should add a third one though. If we're going to do rank and title, we should add rank, title, and years in it. Because sometimes there are guys who are in it for a long time that don't have rank or a title.
All right. So longevity, rank.
Longevity. Yeah.
Longevity, rank, and title. Okay.
All right. So, but Dean and Chris, what if I started in 86?
Yeah.
And then I decide to take some time off, finish school. I come back, get a rank, teach some people once or twice a year for a few years, then take 5 years off, and then do it again. Show up to a seminar here and there. And then, now it's 25, 35, maybe 40 years later now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Does that longevity of 40 years count? Or is it 40 years of active?
When I say longevity, I meant like you are not just in it for a long time, because you're completely right. Longevity from 80 to 2000, but you've only shown up 5 times doesn't really matter to me. But like if you're in it from, let's say, only from 95 to 2000, but you were there every single day for those 5 years, then you've got some longevity. You've got some hours in the system.
Hours versus years.
Like how many hours you put into it versus the years you were there, so to speak, is when I thought of longevity.
And those are good clarifications because, like somebody says, yeah, I trained, and most people who train Filipino arts are trained once, twice a week, right?
Yeah.
But the guy who goes and does a private once a week and then goes to 2 different classes and then is meeting up with 2, 3 people on 2, 3 other nights and takes one night off a week at most. And then the one guy who shows up for an hour on the 2-hour class and goes, well, I'm here, so he's here, so our time's the same. Well, that person who shows up for that limited time is not getting the same training. They're not practicing.
Yeah.
Ventura, Trinidad, and Chita says that, you could be doing it wrong for 50 years, and that's a valid point, too.
That's a valid
true,
point.
depending who's overseeing you. The whole thing at hour, there's.
I think we're trying to add. I think we're collectively saying like we're assuming that the hours you put in were good, so to speak, because otherwise,
I think that's fair to assume, but I think that's an episode in itself. Hours versus years, man. Like
that's a much different
we all
episode.
know guys have been in years, but you know that out of that any of those years, maybe they showed up at like public appearances or you know what I mean or whatever.
Well, there are people who were doing Modern East longer than me by a lot of years, but in the past 10 years, I've committed most of my life to it, but they haven't been around since, 01.
Yeah.
So then they're still my senior by how many years they put into it, but I've been putting in more work than in the past 10 years. So,
and there's a lot of validity to that, Chris, because a professional martial artist versus a passionate martial artist. A passionate martial artist cares about it dearly and can still practice it a lot. But if they haven't committed their income to it, then there can still be not the same level of training. Now, that being said, on the flip side, there are those who open the school who spend so many hours running the school and they're bored with the teaching and they almost start calling it in and they're not learning how to teach better. They're not learning how to improve themselves, that they stagnate as well. So, but assuming that you're not in that position, and I don't think you are, or anyone else in general, yes, being an active, committed martial artist does matter more than somebody who shows up occasionally.
Here's a powerful one, and then I'm going to flip the coin. How some people might get put in this position, no fault of their own. But before I flip the coin, my favorite thing is when a member branches off and then gives himself a higher rank than what they had. I mean, that's all that can happen, with no checks and balances, and and the head of the organization is passed off, and the guy says he's not happy with status quo. He does his own thing, and while he's doing his own thing, hey, I think I'll add another stripe to my belt. If you guys
and give yourself a new title.
Or new title, new stripe. Yeah,
they're the new chief instructor, even though they were only a first-degree black belt.
Rich, you have no names, of course, but have you ever? Has this occurred?
I've seen it. But to Renee's comment, hey, Renee, you promote me to 3 1/3 ranks. I'll promote you to 3 4/9 ranks.
Oh, it's a barter system.
Oh, so you do, okay, look, quid pro quo, okay. Or, hey, bring me in here for this seminar, and at the end, you'll get the next bump or whatever. I mean, there's nobody telling me that doesn't go on, right? I mean, I don't think that's so out of the realm, right?
Right.
That definitely happens.
It's not anybody who's going to take a trade like that, so that's why I could easily use his name, because he'll beat me and anyone else who says it seriously. But and I would stand there and take the beating because it wasn't meant seriously. But that's why I use fractions as well, right? To make sure people understood that it was done generically, because fractional ranks just don't exist, right? But yes, it does happen occasionally. People can go away, they can promote themselves higher, or they can just assume a higher rank and then promote people up. And that's okay.
No, how do you promote?
Within their own organization then. And if it's within their own organization and it's an organizational rank,
Okay.
there's some validity to it. But the issue is when you say that their validity means more than the older organizations or the organization that they broke away from rank, then that comparison breaks down at that point. So
here's an example. Some people say, "Hey, Dean, by the way, since you got your assistant, how come you don't call yourself PG, Punong Guru, since you found this?" And I said, "Well, first of all, it's not all FMA, so that's why I stay away from that." But I could see that would be an example, I guess, where it could be justified, I guess. But I'm not so much looking at, I'm looking at like, okay, you walk away from this thing, you're a fourth degree, now all of a sudden you're a master. But I guess to your point, if you are leading the organization, so it's an organizational rank, I guess, you know what I mean? But Renee had a follow up, or they make their students give them a rank.
That's a thing.
You know, hey, students, where do you think I should be?
Well, because you have that problem then of like, you can only rank up to your current level. So like if you're a fourth degree black belt and you train a student all the way to third, he's going to be a fourth next. Well, you guys can't be the same rank if you're his instructor in theory, right?
Gotcha. Yeah. No, it makes sense. Absolutely. Yeah,
So,
you definitely see that.
there was a relatively well-known Taekwondo instructor in Michigan, Master Eugene Chemesky. Many people would say Grandmaster. He had an 8th degree in Chengmu Kwan, a 7th degree in WTF, and a 6th degree in ITF, or vice versa. And he tried to make sure that all the students could train in all of them. And he had an organization that's called the Universal Taekwondo Brotherhood.
Okay.
And so his students did give him a 10th degree in the UTB organization. But when you spoke to the man, he would laugh and say, "Oh, I'm not even a master." Well, why? Because in the Korea, master starts at like 7th degree, and I have one of my arts at 6th.
So
okay.
It's respectable.
So he had a very good perspective. I mean, he understood the titles here in the U.S. and didn't argue against that. But personally, he wasn't somebody who was doing it for the ego aspect of it.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll have ego, but it wasn't the driving force.
Okay.
From an organizational standpoint, that makes a lot of sense. Like,
yeah. I can see from somebody's got to have it. Here's a question from my fellow muck brother John. If you just train, your skill will show, or it won't. Would you rather have rank or respect?
Respect.
But here's the thing, though. What if the system or style, the skill is not the most important thing? So then the rank's going to be more important. But if skill set and all that, I bet you the respect's going to be more important. I'm just playing devil's advocate. What do you guys say?
John, the example of training 6-7 days a week was myself. Some of the others in the immediate club and the larger clubs that I trained in didn't train at that level. Some of them started before me. And some of them would take a decade off and come back. But in their mind, since they started before me and had rank before me, not only were they my senior, they were senior in skill set. Because they could not get it past their mindset. And even when you would beat them in play, it created frustrations, anger, and other issues. And even if you were asked to work with them on certain things from a mutual instructor, and that instructor had your back, they still would claim that you were the one who was making all the mistakes, because they could not accept that while they may have had rank in one art and high color in the Filipino when you started as a white belt, that you've caught up and surpassed them, not only in rank, or particularly in skill set.
Mm.
And even though if they say, yeah, I put rank aside, they still can't get by that point. They can't accept it. And I'm not saying that's everybody, but
Yeah.
I'm saying I've seen it personally. So it is there. What's more important to me? Skill. But rank does have its place. Rank does have an acknowledgement, and rank does have a reason.
Yeah. No. I definitely agree and appreciate that. Anything you want to add? Let me just catch up on here. Just make sure I rank. You have it's a title, but no rank, and then an example of rank in the title really doesn't denote skill. I would rather have skill. I don't care about rank or title, David. I have seen where money buys ranks and titles. Yeah,
It's also true.
hard to buy skill, 100%. So, Chris, anything you want to add? And I'm going to flip the coin on folks that maybe put in this situation that maybe it's not their fault by a void created, but they want to keep something perpetuated and going. You know?
Well, and I think what I'm going to say could tie it back into the flipping of the coin. Also, the topic was at hand. Like, you know, I think that when you are looking at who is going to be the next of an organization, I think you need to have respect and skill more than title. Because the title, if people don't respect you, they don't care what your title is, so to speak. If they respect you as an individual, they're more likely to follow you. And then obviously, if you're good at what you do, you know, skill and respect over title, so to speak. Not saying that those things are mutually exclusive of the other. They can always be tied in. But I'm just looking at examples where, you know, you have guys who are really good and people like them versus guys who are really good and people don't like them.
Right.
Who do you want? Who's going to follow the guy and help build the next future?
Definitely has to be liked, right?
And not even just liked, like you weren't trying to like con anybody. You were just genuinely a good person, and people like you and like they respect you enough, and they respect what your ideas are for the future, so they're gonna want to follow you. Yeah. I give an example. You know, Grandmaster Brian Zielinski hosted the Legacy Camp this past November or October, and it's tons of people there from various ranks and whatever. All from I'm just gonna keep going to Modern East. There was about 13 original Modern East black belts, Remy Price's black belts there. No one was saying who was in charge of what. No one was trying to say this or big dog anybody, but people were following GM Brian because they respected him. They didn't care that he had a title or that he had a rank. They just like, oh no, I trust him and I respect him, so I'm going to do. I like his ideas. Let's follow him for a little bit. Versus you got people, and my background in Taekwondo, my sensei and I had a huge falling out. I no longer respect him, so I'm not going to follow him. Even though he was my senior, he's the one who taught me almost everything I know about kickboxing.
Yeah.
I'm not going to follow him anymore because I no longer respect him. So you need the respect of your peers.
I agree.
And that's what I think the most important thing is if you're going to be the next guy, so to speak. And then the skill should fall. Like you should have the skill and the respect.
Be nice to have both, right? Skill is more important, but you need someone that knows how to market, promote. Yeah, all the other stuff that comes into play.
Absolutely.
With the whole social media presence, etc.
Or have a marketing student, like my dad has me, because he doesn't know how to do it.
Skills are most important, but what about the ability to teach, or lead, promote, grow, all that?
I counted teaching as part of that skill, just because, and I should have made that clear. Like teaching is a very important skill.
So let me tangent on that point.
Sure.
Many senior instructors, grandmasters, they get caught in the minutia. Mm-hmm. So they are not good at teaching the white belts. They are not good at teaching the mid to high color belts. They are great at teaching your senior and mid-level black belts, right? Because they can adjust them, those little itty-bitty details, and get them to the next level of their performance, their balance, their tightening of the circles and techniques. But when you're looking for that level of perfection from somebody who just needs to be able to walk and chew gum or walk and talk at the same time, then maybe a different instructor is better for that group or the masses. So when you say teaching capability and leadership for that, what might be the best for the organization may not be the best for the masses from that instructor, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay. No, it does. It does. What I want
Well,
to
it's like at
do,
that point, it's the job for the head guy to equip the other instructors to teach the other classes, right?
Right.
and
Yeah.
develop the next generation. Okay, let's go back to where the person's put in charge and all that. So we kind of looked at somebody, they might have some agenda, might take advantage of a current situation. But what are some folks that are put, in other words, okay, let's just say, for instance, I'm trying to come up with an example. All right, so you got somebody that's coming around to do the seminars, and it's an adjunct program. Maybe it runs, I don't know, once or twice a day, and you have this guy that comes in, maybe bi-monthly, to feed information so they can continue to perpetuate the program as well as continue to get students up to date and their growth. But now that person passed off or was removed or whatever, but now this person goes in there and takes that over, but they have no documentation. To me, if they want to keep growing it, I don't think that's necessarily bad. I guess a year, how many years they have in, I guess what would be relevant. What are you saying
Can
that?
you define the guy again? He's the guy that was not involved or was involved and then became the guy, or
No, he was involved. He was like,
Mhm.
let's say he was a school owner or he was the head teacher, or whatever it may be. But now there's a void. So he has his students under him that's teaching. So let's go with school owner, just make it easy. So he
Okay.
has this adjunct program running, we'll say FMA, but now there's a void because the person that was coming in here giving him information to perpetuate the program going is no longer coming. So, but he continues to teach it without any documentation or anything like that. I don't look at it as that's necessarily wrong in there, but it could go different ways. Where did that person maybe try to seek out somebody else, maybe in the interim, or did they just go on their own, just say, you know what, I'm good, I don't need anybody else, I got enough. So I'm sure this has had to happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So a plan to have a backfill is very important. Um, be it the lead instructor for the school ownership, whatever the case may be. The question came up with tangential from, like I said, another discussion was around, what if you are the leader? What if you were asked to be the leader?
Hmm.
And yet the instructor made it semi-private with a few public people, right? And those people have verified, but now, does that mean everybody's supposed to follow you anyways? Even though the instructor never said that, right? Even though the instructor never said to everyone else, hey, go follow this one or two people and make sure they've got your support. He just said, I want you two to carry on the art.
Okay.
So in doing that, they go forward. Does that mean that the other 5 or 6 people who go up and do their own thing are now bad? Because they were teaching, they were allowed to teach. They just weren't asked to carry the art forward.
See, yes.
Isn't
Right.
teaching carrying the art forward?
It can be,
Okay.
Okay.
but is it more of a carrying the art forward in its tradition? Are you teaching it in a combined mindset? Are you teaching it in partiality? Are you teaching it? And even if you are, does it matter?
Anything you'd like to add, Chris? And then before you do, Renee's saying this. Do you think there is a direct correlation between schools and splitting up and schools that teach the lessons they have learned in episode 355? How many schools have probably broken up over it.
What was the lesson learned in 355? I didn't see it.
I might have to ask you to leave, Chris. I just can't believe you didn't watch 355.
Dean, I've been busy.
I don't even know what to say. I'm a little taken
Dean,
back.
I was busy setting up my I bought a house.
Well, I'm gonna need you to turn around, just going to just
Do you want
grab
me to
some
go
house.
leave and do you want me to leave and watch the episode and then come back?
No, but you should watch the episode though. Just
I will.
kidding.
I'll put it on my list as soon as I'm done here. As soon as I hang up this, I'll start watching it.
And an emphatic wow from Renee. So
Okay, look, everyone can target me. Everyone can go ahead.
so Rich, what do you? All right, on that example, teaching the art or the overall promotion. I'm just thinking about what you said, like what Chris said. If you're propagating, aren't you're teaching it, and aren't you at that point
Because
still kind of promoting?
that's how I view it. Because I mean, how am I? And I'll just use myself as an example here. How am I going to carry on the quote unquote Remy art when I never met Remy? So I'm technically speaking, never going to carry on his art because he never taught me. Or am I always going to carry on because the people who teach me learn from him? And I continue to teach.
All right.
Just that's my thought process of this. Like, well, when I always thought of teaching, because I mean, from what everyone I've talked to about Professor, again, using Modern Ace as an example, he would always say, go, you must go do this. You must teach. You must go. So like, my dad made me an instructor under him, but am I an instructor of Remy's art or my father's art, or am I instructor of Remy's art through my father? And now my students are going to learn Remy's art through my father, through me. Because now you're going to go into the delineation of the arts, which is a whole other episode we could talk about. But
well, did that phrase by him create problems for like the topic from the topic here we're talking about, like people teaching maybe that weren't without dot? What do you think? What say you, Rich?
Your dad taught Modernese. Your dad taught you. You're teaching Modernese.
Okay.
But if your dad is teaching something more than what Remy taught him, then that should be documented. And I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying it's good that it's documented. So therefore, your dad gets the credit for what he was teaching, and then that where he learned that from can be given proper lineage. So the small circle jiu-jitsu will be linked back to Wally J, right? But yet it is also part of Remy's art. But by saying many of this did come from Wally J, you don't necessarily have to say all of it did individually. Yeah.
So Rich,
Yes, sir.
are you instructing Chris now to document? Chris, you need to go back to.
I will document everything and say the guy who taught me to document was Master Rich Parsons.
Great.
Let me get my book. I'll start writing this down.
Just kidding. Oh my God.
No, but I do agree with that. Like, there needs to be the clear line of especially giving respect to the people who came before you. And I know that like Uncle Ritu on radio and all those a very big influence of mine, and I hang out with him regularly, and he always tells me the importance of when he's teaching his stuff in FCS Kali, he's always paying homage back to the guys he learned from. So even though FCS Kali is his system, it's a combination of all the things he learned from other people because he had multiple instructors. You know, when I teach my guys, you know, and I quote GM Bobby Tabata, which I don't know if he's still watching this. I saw him, he was watching this earlier. He said this, he goes, if you do Muay Thai and put it in your Balintawak, it is your Balintawak. So like, oh, that made the phone drop. That was a big deal.
That was a very powerful statement.
but you know, and that's what my old process has always been like. Well, if you make it your own, which is what so many of the greats have done, then that's what we should all be doing. We should be making it our own. So,
all right, let me see here. It depends on whether your teacher learned the art or cross-trained the art within your art. A lot of arts. Okay. Um, okay. Anything else you guys want to speak on before we go into how could we potentially derail or negate this stuff from happening?
I just want to reiterate the part we said in the test episode. We're not going to solve this problem. We're just going to talk about it. We're going to try to give some cool ideas.
We're going to bring attention to it, and at least that it's exposed and talked about. So if somebody's kind of going to be encountering this soon or needs to deal this soon or has nothing in place yet, perhaps this episode could give them some ideas, I guess would be the hopeful goal, right? As a teacher, anything based on my opinion. Okay, give credit where credit's due, 100%. Anything you'd like to add, Rich?
I didn't target anybody specifically with my comments. My comments were meant very generically.
Yeah.
If for some reason you think it's about you, please reach out to me and we can discuss it one-on-one. It wasn't the intent, but we can definitely discuss it.
You did tell me to document more.
Well,
I'm just playing.
To give your dad more credit, right? Where necessary or required.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's a good thing, right? Give Uncle Bruce credit. All right, these are the core elements in all systems. They need to be the core of the training, but there's always room for evaluation. Okay, all right. So a good chunk of this we were talking about in a test run is how to kind of avoid. In other words, we threw out some examples of systems. Some might not be affected. The example I brought up is when, Grand Tuan Gahe, when he passes, I don't think this going to have much of an effect on PTK overall. I'm not saying that's good, bad, or indifferent. It's just how I feel based on how there's so many separate factions going on their own and have been going on their own for a multitude of years now. However, though, we've seen the chaos which happened when GM Remy died and there. How do we avoid something just of that magnitude? And there and during the test run, we were talking about a few different examples. Some were coming in through the comments that had suggestions, but we all kind of agreed that something should be in place, even if it's not followed through to the T, but better to have something in place than not in there. So, Rich, like to start?
Yeah. So if you've got a public designation of the person or people, like as mentioned previously, Dr. Hartman does, Bill McGrath does with his committee brought up during the test run. It's known there's people who will help bring up the next leader, which is good. Chris brought up earlier how there was examples there, and how it can change based over time. Mm-hmm. Leo Gahi's had people designated and he's removed them, or he's just removed seniors from the system to let other people know. And that's his business within his organization. But as you said there, Dean, that actually has helped make sure that the art itself will carry on, because now they're all out doing their own thing, right? So no plan survives contact with the enemy, but yet if you have a good plan and it's adaptable plan, people will be able to will be able to work it for you.
Okay. Before we go into the specific examples, anything you want to add, Chris? What folks can do to be proactive in this regard? Anything you want to
add? I hearken back to, my dad was there when Professor Wally J said it was Professor Leon J is in charge of Small Circle, after he had previously stated there was going to be a council of 5. So, obviously the best way to do it is if the head of the organization has a big event where it's, public for everyone to see, this is the guy. That's the easiest and best way to do it, because then, as there were people who left small circle to teach their own thing, and that's fine. You know, they were with Professor J for years and years and years. Nothing wrong with that. But Leon is the guy. Professor Leon J is the head of the organization, as said so by the creator of the organization. So
Right.
while his students may go off and do their own thing, their students can no longer say necessarily that, well, we're still part of the small circle family. Not really, because you're no longer part of the organization. But barring public examples like that, which again is the easiest, I mean, paperwork is good, witnesses to see it. I mean, that's the best way to do it, because otherwise you're going to have so many of the he said, she said stuff where, well, so and so told me this. Well, who was there with you? Oh, well, my dog was there to witness it happen. Well, it doesn't really count to me.
Yeah.
You know?
But everybody likes Stan, my dog.
Right, but I like Stan.
Stan's a good dog.
And Stan liked me. So
Hey, there were 3 people who witnessed it, me, myself, and I. All right, so.
But here's the thing, though, like the debacle. Maybe I shouldn't say debacle. That maybe I gotta be careful. The whole thing with the will with GM Remy. I mean, so in other words, there was a will, but I guess it didn't get executed, and there was 20 something people on there. So there's a will. There was still a fracture. So was a fracture due to the non-execution of the will, or was a fracture just due because he passed?
Because
So
he put 25 people to do it.
Yeah, I mean,
They were never given a chance.
all right, let's hear
it. If the will was executed, or even before it was executed, if the leaders of that time who were in charge of making the will public and or execution, then they could have attempted it at that point. They did not. So I can't say that it failed just because there was a plan and people chose not to do it, or that there were too many egos involved. The plan just was never given a chance to be executed.
Okay. Tim is sitting at an airport board. He would like to jump in. So please add to that.
Add to Dr. Tim being bored sitting in an airport, or
no, add to what
I'm sorry you're bored, sir. But I mean,
he wants to join us, Chris. That's what he's saying.
I know that. And I always love talking to Dr. Tim. And I think that it could be, obviously I was not there, so I don't know why or how things didn't work. I've only talked to you guys who were there and read the will, and I look at it all and I'm like, anytime that there is that many numbers of people to be in charge of an organization that big, I mean, I truly believe in it, just going on the modern Arnis route, any one professor would have picked, people would have been upset. There was no unified person that everyone liked in the entirety of modern Arnis, because you have too many personalities all meshing together. You have too many people, what's the expression? Over egging the pudding, or too many, whatever the expression may be. It was never gonna work the way that was written out, at least in my opinion.
So, Rich, what say you on this? I think there needs to be more than just a will. I think you have to have a council. I think you have to have some. I mean, like, especially the organization, the size that Remy had. I mean, it sounds like a will wasn't going to cut it, no matter how many people were on there. What say you?
He needed a council of people who could have executed that, not just a single person. He needed a council and have it be established. And the council could be as small as 2 or 3, right? But by bringing 2 or 3 people in, making them aware, and having a plan in place, then that puts people in alignment. Hi, Datu Tim. Thank you for joining.
It just seems like, okay, you got the will, but in other words, we were talking about this in a test run, depending on how big the organization is, where you have regional, directors, if you will, or whatever, overseeing how many factions or school in that geographic area. In addition to having, of course, that written out in the will, I'm just thinking for something of that magnitude, the size that GM Remy had, it's just too bad some of those stuff weren't in place. Perhaps you wouldn't see what's going on today if that stuff was in place and carried out. And before we get to Datu, Chris, what say you?
I mean, from what I've heard, the time it was a very rough time for everyone, obviously, and again, we're staying in the modern Easter just because that's something we're all easily connected and related to. When Professor passed, everyone kind of was like, well, what do we do? My dad literally told me that. He goes, Chris, there were so many times people were talking to each other that they had no clue what to do. Because, and according to him, he said no one thought Remy was going to die first. Everyone thought that Professor Wally was going to go, and then George and a bunch of other people would go before Remy died. But Remy suddenly died. Like, it really was sudden for a lot of people, is what I'm told. So when you have the suddenty of it, you also then look at whatever plan might have been made. It's like, well, we got time to plan that. We'll execute that. We got, he's not going anywhere yet. And all of a sudden, boom, we have to execute a will, and the body's not even cold yet, So we look at all these things as, again, my big thing is that no one Professor would have picked. Even if he had a council of 2 people, you would have seen splinter groups because there was just so many of them. Not everyone back then, I'm sure Master Parsons and Dr. Tim can tell me, you guys weren't all best friends in the modern race world. Not everyone liked each other, I'm sure. So.
Datu, you're up. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, faithfully. I actually was karaokeing in the Philippines.
I bet you.
I did Open Arms as well.
Me not there?
You were not there. I did a second song.
I'm hurt.
Dean, well, they made me. Wait, listen. How can you do Filipino martial arts if you're not willing to karaoke?
Damn
because
right.
we turn the karaoke machine off when I sing.
There we go. Let's turn that microphone off. Okay, so first of all,
runs away.
and I did a good job. Okay, so first of all, Remy had a will, and it was never executed. Randy Shea was the chairman of the board, the financial advisor, Remy's medical advisor, and the executor of the will. But for some reason, it was never executed. You could have sat there and said, here's what Remy stated, because he'd been working on the who inherits the art for over a decade. Okay. Multiple attorneys have modified it through the years. David Pajak was the first, who was a classmate of mine, and eventually became one of my students. Brett Salafia, who was a classmate of Brian Zwolinski's, was the second, and the last was Kevin Black, one of my black belts, who's now in the FBI. They never attempted to execute the will, or they could have sat there and said, listen, it's going to take time to execute the will, but we could follow Remy's wishes. Instead, a subgroup, which was known as the Masters of Tappy Tappies, which that title was not created to take over the art, because Remy was healthy when he did the first one. He didn't realize what his medical condition was. We did the first 2, which is Gabrielle and Jeff in Tunisia. But when this, in my opinion, a coup was executed, there was no attempt to recruit and retain people. They could have followed a rank structure, because there were people who were higher ranks that were ignored, and they capped their belts at 5th degree, which then says, what about the 6th degrees, like Theater, Dan, and myself, and let alone the Filipinos that we found out about later, who were 7s and 8s. So if they wanted to go forward, they could have followed Remy's wishes, which was document, not take advantage of a sick old man. I was the only American present when he was diagnosed. And I told Randy Shea when I got back, get him out of there before someone takes advantage. and then a whole bunch of people went over and they got promoted. So what are the optics on that? And I'm using the word optics. I'm not saying the truth. You have to figure out what you think it is. I know what my opinion is on the whole thing. But in my opinion, there was a coup executed, which is why things didn't go, which is why, Bruce, your father wasn't invited in, why a lot of people went their own direction. And listen, you know what? When the head of an art passes away, of course people are going to go, because he was the glue that kept us together. Some people may have only been going there because of Remy. We see it in other arts too.
Sure.
You know, but leaving an organization doesn't mean leaving the art. So I'm going to ask you this, Chris. Do you think I'm not doing modern Ernie's?
Sorry. I thought you were going to go more.
No. Do you
I
think
think
I'm
you got
not
it.
doing modern Ernie's? Okay. So when they made a public statement about Remy stepping down, doing his medical condition, that's when I submitted my letter of resignation. I wasn't kicked out. I actually addressed this in a post. I resigned. And privately, I told Randy Shea, I'm going to go and do my own thing because I didn't like what they were doing and how they were dealing with stuff. And I go, you want to start a mudslinging contest? I'll bury you guys. But I can peacefully coexist. We might even be able to do some things together. Then the mudslinging started. Where's the IMAF now?
So you're no longer doing modern Ernie's?
What did I say?
Well, you said you resigned.
From the
Are you
organization.
saying resigned from the organization, but not the art?
Yeah,
Correct.
leaving an organ. Okay, so when you said, when people left Wally J, you said they left. They're no longer a small circle. That's wrong.
I said they weren't part of the umbrella organization.
You said they weren't doing
Because-
small circle.
No, I meant like they weren't
yeah.
following Leon. So
And that's why we have to be very see. This is the reason why people are like, why am I so specific on words? Because that was I misinterpreted your intent on what you said there. But of course, I've been flying for like 15 hours.
Oh, so you're punch drunk.
I'm a little punch drunk.
Yeah.
I wish it was real drunk, but I don't do that when I'm in public.
So,
But leaving the organization doesn't mean you left the art. So all those people who chose not, because at one time, using Leon or Wally as the example, he named 4 people. So then he took that back, which actually damaged his organization more. If he had just named Leon in the first place by himself, then you wouldn't do this. But if all of a sudden you name there's a council of 4, then take that back, how butthurt do you think those other 3 guys are going to be about that?
But I will say though, like that was the only good thing about both of those instances, because going to the original topic that we were discussing, like how do we determine who is what? Like both of those events were public knowledge, at least. So at least it was then understood. All right, Wally said this at one point. Now Wally's saying this. It's not good that he's contradicting himself, but at least he's making it public.
But at the end of the day, here's the thing: people are going to go their own direction. It doesn't matter who Remy named. Remy could have named? I don't know. He could have named George Bush his successor.
His neighbor. Who cares?
Yeah. There we go. People are going to follow whomever they want. You can, and getting back to what you said about using Ted Buat as the example. Here's the other thing. Rich and one other person were asked, "Hey, I want you guys to keep teaching." The question was, what would you have said to other people if they were able to visit me? Myself, I'm 4.5 hours away, so I wasn't there. And that being said, I know that Ted wasn't going to put me in charge. The person I defer to all the time in Bluntwalk when it comes to our lineage is Rich.
So, Rich, here's a question for you, Rich.
Yes.
When he passed, Ted Watt passed, was there any of this stuff going on like at Modern East? Did he have stuff in order? I mean, was it?
No, there was no certificates, no lineage, no paperwork. He'd asked me and one other to carry on the art, but there were a few people he'd been told previous to that while he was healthy that they could teach, and they had been teaching either onesie, twosies, or a small group. So there were those there, but there was no actual, this person is the people, or these 2 are the people before he had his strokes, and then, or before he died.
So,
and Rich is too modest to say this. Well, first of all, I was the first one that was allowed. Rich and I were the only two allowed to teach seminar series in Balintawak. So I started because I was teaching modern, and then I would show that some of the techniques were a derivative of Balintawak. And I would show the correlation, and it just started evolving to actually doing Balintawak seminars. Rich was, I backed into it. Rich was given specific permission to teach Balintawak seminars in a series. There were two other people that were given individual one-offs, but Rich and I were the only two we trusted to teach actual seminars. And I tried to get him to teach seminars. And he was like, Tim, how many times did I correct you in 5 minutes? About 10, 15 times. How the hell am I going to teach a group of 30 people? I'm like, Mom, Ted, I hate to tell you this, but if you do a seminar, it's going to be a hell of a lot more than 30 people showing up.
So, hey, Chris, here's a question for you. Have you and your father talked about this? Like, on your guys' current faction, are you putting things in place? Or is he putting things in place with you, I should say?
I think I have the easiest way in because it's family. Like, and all of his top guys that are higher ranked than me know that, like, oh, well, it's going to go to Chris more than likely. And I have not asked for it. I've never wanted it, so to speak. Like, according to tradition, my older brother would get it, but he has no interest in the arts. So he never wanted it.
Is he training?
Not in FMA. Like, he's busy being a cop.
Yeah.
So
then, yeah.
he doesn't have time to go to seminars.
And these other guys that are in your martial family there, how many of them dedicate modern arnis as a primary martial art like you do?
One of his guys teaches a strictly only modern arnis class. The other ones are teaching privately and in parks and things of that nature. But my dad, he basically said, Chris, at some point it's probably going to go to you. But I never asked for it because in my mind, my dad's never going to die. That's how I view it. Until obviously at some point I know he will, but he's still got too much to teach me. So,
Chris, who's his highest ranking guy, and where is he?
He has two guys in particular: Master Johnny Quest, yes, that's his name, and Master Mike Matthews. Both
he has a dog named Bandit. Or Bandit.
Yes, Bandit.
And how?
That's
what rank
Master
are
Johnny's
they?
dog. They are, I believe, both sixes. They might both be seven. They're both on equal footing. I just forget what rank they are.
6 or 7, and you're currently.
I'm a fourth.
You're currently fourth. They're 6 and 7, and you're obviously young and coming and uprising. So yeah, I think
they've been doing this longer than I've known my father.
Yeah, but you're okay. But my question was, maybe a little more specific. Do any of them do modern arnis as their primary art?
I guess off of what your exact question is, no.
Then, and this goes back to things. This is why I've talked about this. If this is all you do, in your lineage, your father's branch of the tree, I would defer to you because you're not. Okay, when you do the art within your art, which a lot of people do, you're choosing which parts that you want to do and which parts you don't want to do, and you're building it off of somebody else's chassis. Remy didn't do that. Remy taught his martial expression, which was Filipino martial arts. But when it came time for testing, that's when people were able. The art within your art was your ranking program, not the teaching, because he taught everybody the same.
But didn't his expression come from his background in karate and judo and the things he learned from his grandpa?
So he built the synthesis. We want his formula, and me putting in Silat doesn't make it modern arnis. The modern arnis is the martial system he created, and the farther he went along, the less he used the phrase, you could do this. Because when you did it wrong, he wouldn't say you're wrong. He would say, well, you could do that too. And then he would correct you. And some people thought that was another way of doing things. He used to allow for, how did I say it before? It was, he wasn't too, like using the form as an example, he allowed for stylistic interpretation of the movement. So if you did an Okinawan martial art, you could do an Okinawan-ish. If you had Kung Fu, you had a Kung Fu flavor. The later he went, the more he wanted the techniques. This is the way it was supposed to be done. I was actually, him he and I and Lori were talking about me writing up a written curriculum for the organization at one time. Actually, just before he passed, or before he was diagnosed, because he wanted to get things more in tune. So all the students had, when you had the checklist or syllabus or whatever, then everyone had all the pieces of material. You wouldn't have to worry about whether one region never got 6-count drill. If they had it on a book, you could see, oh, look, what's this 6-count drill thing? And then, professor, can you show us? Oh, we lost Rich. But he was getting away from that and going more into this, the way, as the example was when I shot the video of the forms at the last Michigan camp. And then I went to the Georgia camp a month later, and he had me take all the black belts in the other room and say, I need you to teach it this way. And that he goes, I want you to teach it the way you did it in the forms. And that was to start eliminating the stylistic interpretation and making it more of a standalone art.
So here's a question for Rich.
Yes, sir.
Because I think this is a valuable part. Like, not only keeping the integrity of the organization and who's going to continue right over there, but the whole thing on curriculum. Like, did Ted, how do you assure that the curriculum was being passed on? Like, did he have something in place, a manual with you guys, or did he just, what did he do?
This will be a fun answer. Go ahead, Rich.
No manual. He had some loose notes. The other person took copious notes. I took my own notes. I was the only one who actively worked on him with how to teach the basics for Bisudario and Seguidas. He got frustrated with me about once a month. I'd come in the last 10 minutes of a class. I'd be like, okay, let's go over Bisudario. After about the fourth time of that, he's like, Rich, you know this. Why are we going over this? And I said, because I'm watching you teach me. Okay. And then he says, you're the teacher, I'm the student. So then he helped teach me how to teach him. And then a few months after that, Dan Anderson was out, and he had worked with Menunket. He was doing a seminar in the middle of the day at Jay Spiro's. I walked in a little early, and Jay goes, I gotta go take care of some stuff. Can you please work with Dan on Bisudario? And I did. And he's like, hey, Jay, come back. Do you see this? Do you feel it? And I started working. Yeah. Because I had picked up the guiding hand that Ted used, the way he used to approach it, to place the student's stick in the right location so they felt where to be, and the comfort level allowed them to grow quicker. So do I think I have something that some of the others don't have? Definitely. But does that mean I'm the only one out there that's teaching? No.
No, but you have
bad. No.
Okay. So, Chris, and then we'll swing around back to Datu. So, Chris, how were your fathers sure? In other words, we're talking about, making sure that there's going to be an air and things are going to go the right way with social media, having councils and all that. But the heart, the body of a system, the curriculum, like, how's your father ensuring that? Like, what do you guys got in place, I guess, as far as that's going?
Like, do we have a curriculum?
No, I know you have a curriculum, but what do you have as far as that kind of like in the Bat Cave or something like that, a master copy, something that could be passed on to his higher ranking students and you, so you guys can assure that that's what's going to be carried out, or your father will be assured that's what's going to be carried out.
We have a Google Doc. I mean,
Right.
I think that's. I mean, we don't have a secret scroll. My father
Google
wrote in
Doc,
Chinese.
to me, that would suffice. You got something that's,
because once it's on the internet, it exists forever. So.
Okay. No.
And I think that what is. I know my dad's wishes are very particular, in the sense that they're not particular at all, because my father's an enigma, as anyone who knows him will agree. His curriculum is designed to be, and he learned this straight from professor, and this is what he wanted it to be done by, for the instructors to teach at the beginning portion. Obviously, easy to do, easy to teach, easy to replicate. It has to be simplistic enough for you to understand it, then for you to teach it, and then for someone else to replicate you teaching it. So that's what he wants from the curriculum side of things. But he also wants it to be ever evolving because he doesn't believe in any system that does it the same way for 50, when he learned Kung Fu in China, yes, GM, my dad's, no, he wrote it on a napkin, but he then put it in a Google Doc.
I was wondering if you saw that or not.
Oh, I did. He wrote it on a napkin on the way to a seminar in Georgia, but he then put it on a Google Doc. Well, he had Master Mike Matthews put it on a Google Doc for him. But either way.
No, it's good that you guys have that. That's great. Okay.
After a long time of me asking him, Dad, what's the next step? He goes, I don't know. What are you doing right now? Well, I'm just going to keep working what you said to do last time. Okay, keep doing that. And I'll tell you what to do next one. I remember to. Well, thanks, Dad. That's how I was taught the weird way, or like maybe the old school way.
That's okay. That's okay.
Whatever Dad wanted to teach me is what I learned.
Well, it sounds like he's doing a good job. So, all right. What do we not touch upon as far as assurance of no debacles when the head figure passes away? Now, knowing that it doesn't really matter if people are going to do their own thing, but at least if there's stuff in place, I think it's fair to say, hopefully, it won't be as well, the level of where it could be toxic, folks leaving, factions coming out of this, people doing their own thing, splitting, divide and conquer. I think with things at least in place, I think that can help where that's not going to be as prevalent. Anything that we didn't touch on?
Just to reiterate some things. So like in a living trust, you can have someone, let's say you have two heirs or two trusted people, trustees. One of them could be your power of attorney for medical. The other one could be your power of attorney for financial. Therefore, one single person doesn't have all the authority and can ignore or take advantage of it. So the one that's got the medical can go out and make those decisions. The one that's got the financial can make the bills and make sure that certain things are being paid on time and things are taken care of. So there's a lot of value to having more than one. 25 might have been too many, but more than one is definitely advantageous for making sure that it gets done. And then people understanding the clear directions that are required, such as a living trust or a living will. This is basically what that is you want what's to be done at this point. And if that's clear and concise and the people involved who are required to carry it forward, even though those that carry it forward may not be the ones who become the leaders, it's clear to them what needs to be done.
No, okay. Datu?
Well, using modern as the example. Well, actually, use Blinsaw for a second. So when we're talking about Ted, the one thing we didn't circle completely around, curriculum's important. Unfortunately, second year, and Ted was asking me why I was doing the backup method and not the preferred of one of our techniques, because he did it off the top of his head, trying to preserve the way that Anshan taught. So there is, but if we had a written curriculum, then I would have been like, hey, what's this technique? What's that technique? What's the other one? So I have my Modern Ace University, so it's online. I've had people graduating from the online course. The written curriculum I have actually shared with others. And Chris, having a Google Doc, that's all you need. I mean, that's it. So your elements, and then there's system and style. System is the methodology. Style is your interpretation and your swagger. So I think sometimes get the two confused, where we can evolve, we can put our own swing on things, just like two different students. One might be a puncher, another one might be a kicker. That's just preference. So we can still have plenty of room for individuality and personal expression. Now, as far as doing stuff like using Professor example, he thought he did everything. Unfortunately, some people that he trusted were not trustworthy, in my opinion. A will was never executed, and small group of people ruined the art in the big scheme of things. The organization is on life support at best, in my opinion, and others say that to me all the time. You cannot. There's no way we can stop this from happening because I was let down by someone recently that I've trusted for a long time internally, not in the organization, but in my school. And so my school is 35 years old this year. Okay, it's our 35th anniversary. I cannot tell you how many times over those 3.5 decades that people have let me down, and I thought they were one person, and then true colors came out later. So there's nothing we can do to guarantee this not happening. What you need to do. So here's the thing. I named 3 guys to mentor. If something happened to me, like, okay, I had that car accident last year. I could have been taken out permanently. Craig had to come. He went to Brazil with me. Thank God they drained the fluid out of my knee. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been walking. But I got 3 guys, Ty, Chad, and Craig, that will mentor the next generation if something happens to me. I don't think you put all your eggs in one basket because, because people will disappoint you or their life gets in the way of this.
Yeah, somebody else can come up with them. Sure. Yeah.
You look at this. Okay. I will always talk about the art and who's whom in the zoo and all this other stuff. This is what I do for a living. Not everyone does. I make the art my priority. If I have a problem at work, I can't put this on the shelf. This is my work. So when we talk about, I am a professional, like Rich made the comment, there's a difference between a passionate martial artist and a professional martial artist. And it doesn't mean a professional can't be passionate. Okay? And we do know that there's McDojos out there and stuff of that nature, but I have dedicated myself to the art. You need to have candidates that can make that same level of dedication. Because, Ty's got a guy, so Ty is his top guy in his Kung Fu system under his Sifu. He is going to actually support one of his juniors because his juniors made the commitment to the art. He will do this as a profession, and he will be a mentor, like in Filipino martial arts, he'll be the kuya, the big brother to help out. But he is not going to be the person to lead the organization into the next generation because he has other commitments in life. He's got a family. He's got that has support, and martial arts is what he does on the side.
Yeah.
So we need people if we want something to really go forward and be strong. And I'm always talking about creating that gene. You need people that can do this as a primary art, or if they can't, or primary part of their life, which means making it their profession or a big part of that profession. Maybe they can't do the full-time school, but maybe they're doing a full-time job and putting full-time hours into the martial arts school. But if the problem with using modern as an example, you look at all the guys the Knots. The only one that was a full-time martial arts school owner was Kenny Smith, and that was an Ishinru school first and foremost. He's also a grandmaster in DKI now, which obviously modern's not his primary because how can become a DKI grandmaster if modern's not your primary art, unless he bought it. I'm not saying he's done that. Kenny was skillful. I always thought he had good skills, and I liked what he did at Sinwali boxing, and he put the work in. So I'm assuming he did it the right way, which means modern is not his primary focus. But we need somebody, even if they're not the most qualified, we need somebody to carry that banner forward. And sometimes the second best is actually the best.
Chris, you need to carry the banner.
Well, Chris, here's one thing I've been meaning to talk to you about. One thing here, if you're going to carry this forward, or this is a suggestion for you and your father, I don't know how much money you've tied up in this, because it would help the family in the big scheme. I understand you're Arnis International. I think modern Arnis International would be much better because you're also, since modern is your primary thing, I think it'd be better branding. Because then people like when they see Arnis International, I get the question, well, who are these guys? Who are they under? What are they going on? I go, oh, no, that's Bruce.
But we just got the website, arnisinternational.org.
That doesn't matter. what URLs are dirt cheap.
FMAclub.net. I mean,
My website is wmrnice.com. W for world, modernist.com. And I also own worldmodernist.com as a URL as well. But I mean, URLs are cheap. You just go GoDaddy, they're like $15 a year, not a big deal. And it doesn't matter what your URL is. What matters is what the name of your website is. Now, when you run out of your patches and stuff, I think if you went Modern East International, I think it'd be a much better. Because I hate to say we traded off our teacher's name, but we traded off our teacher's name. I go, Remy's name, Remy, Ernesto, and Ted Buat, and other people I've trained with, they've opened doors for me. But I have to make sure that they invite me back based on my skills, not by their names. Someone asked me recently, so there was this Arnis Legacy event, and they did this recognition thing where everyone got a black belt diploma who attended. I stopped by. I didn't know, why didn't you attend? They go, because I got endorsements from the three brothers. I don't need a signature. I don't want a signature of Roberto on a diploma. Roberto is blind and bedridden. So what is the value of that signature? But the thing here is I don't need a signature to prove I'm good. I go to seminars. Rich has been there. Hi, my name's Tim Hartman. I teach Filipino martial arts. Oh, Dean's been there. And then I rock the room. So that being said, I still, having that connection, Modern East has got a rich history. And I think throwing something on there, and just something to think about, Chris, just something to think about. I keep meaning to talk to you about this, and then it never pops up every time we talk.
Chris, you that banner, man.
Stuck in the airport.
You got to, so Chris, you want to make this full time, don't you? That's your goal, right? You want to be full time, right?
I have a harder. See, the thing, I worked my first job was working in a commercial dojo. That was my full-time job. That was my first job. I was 16, I was 15, got my first black belt in Taekwondo, and my sensei then hired me on to be his full-time instructor. I taught all the classes.
Okay, did he actually make you call him sensei?
No, I just call him that out of respect.
Okay, no, but it's Sabanen, and it just drives me crazy. Sabanen is the Korean.
Well, so the problem is he wasn't. The problem was he wasn't completely Korean. I don't even think he knew what he was doing at the end of it.
Oh,
so, yeah, he threw out half our forms before I got the black belt. So he took down the Korean flag and all those other things.
Okay, all right.
That's why I just call him sensei because it's easiest. So
it is. It's generic.
He never once asked me to. It was always Mr. So and so, and I'm not saying his name out of respect for him. But I watched his passion die because it was his full-time livelihood. I watched him suffer trying to fix the engine on his bus that he had to get the kids from school in. I watched him cry practically trying to fix the AC unit for his 12,000 square foot space. So as much as I would love for it to be a full-time career, I'm hesitant because of what I've seen that man go through and how much he suffered and still suffers. I drive past his school regularly, and it's a shell of what it was back in the day.
Yeah, so what if you modeled after somebody else though? That was
it's. Oh no, I'm sure I could model it. It's the reservation in my head where I never want the passion to go away. Much as I respect the professional martial artists like Dr. Tim, I respect that. Kevin and Jackie Bradbury, who made it their profession, I respect them wholeheartedly. I know in my current standpoint also, because I just bought a house, I can't really afford to leave anything. And my current job is making me a substantial income where I'm not really working really hard. So,
do you have room for a home, Joe?
Not yet. I'm still working on the budgeting of everything yet. First-time homeowner is kind of scary.
Yeah. And but if you got a garage,
I do think that I don't have a garage. It's a condo.
Oh, okay.
I do think that there was one thing that we were talking about, when you asked earlier, Dean, are there things that we failed to say, but just didn't cover? And I think this is a blanket statement I'd throw out this way. I don't think that Professor, and this is my opinion as a man who never met him, I don't think he set up the organization incredibly well to surpass him, because he had so many different titles, ranks, and acknowledgments and certified instructors, everyone thinking that they were the guy. without ever being told they were the guy. Because my dad said this, and I know Dr. Tin, you told me this too. Professor had this way about him that would make everyone in the room, even if there's 400 people, he'd make you feel like you were his individual focus and you'd feel special. So when you do that and you have all these people who think that, oh, well, Professor treated me to this, I must be this. He had so many people he did that to, he almost took it out from the knees. You know what I mean? But, and again, that's just my perspective looking at it as someone who was never a part
I
of
mean,
Professor's time.
the fact that he chose 25 people for the
Yeah.
will kind of tells me he didn't want to disappoint anybody. I mean,
Or he didn't care.
what say
Who
you
knows?
on that?
Well, okay.
Or,
So first of all, there was a cultural issue thing going on there, and because we talked about this on one of the shows. There was no internet. There were no cell phones. Were like a briefcase back then. We couldn't do Google Translate because, okay, he and I were both before Google Translate, and Rich and Dean, the three of us were before Google.
There was
There's
a
no
time
Google.
before Google Translate?
Yeah, there was a time before Google.
Google was even
No. So how do you look up cultural things? How do you find? I mean, okay, why do I go to the Philippines? Not because of the martial arts. I had the best, in my opinion. I had the best teacher. No, I had the best teacher for me. Okay, that was Remy Braces, and then I had other great teachers for me, like Ted Buat, Dr. G, and others. But Remy was probably the best person for me to hook up with. There was no way for me to find out where he was coming from, but then to hang out with him and or go to the Philippines. I would go to Toronto and I would be exposed to Filipino culture, but I go to the Philippines to be immersed. And I didn't be able to do that on a regular basis like this trip I'm coming back from until after he passed away. I think today I understand him a hell of a lot more than when he was alive. And I wish to God I had this knowledge base.
right.
There's the other thing too is Filipinos are such an anomaly out there. I mean, listen, what was always first? Japanese. That was the big thing in the States. And then you'd have Chinese. Okay. Even though China outnumbers Japan, but that's another story. But well, it depends on if you're in the Bay Area or on the East Coast. So we don't understand cultural aspects. We don't realize there's certain things that Filipinos don't want to address. Not to mention the language. Remy spoke English as his third, no, probably his fourth or fifth language. So how many times have things were lost in translation, or people chose to interpret it differently?
Yeah.
I mean, some people did it maliciously. Other people just didn't know better. And I don't think, okay, so I just found out we have in Sikran, we're I forgot the exact words. It's translates to world brotherhood, the Sikran world brotherhood. But that's not what it means in the Filipino language. The word brother, it's kapatunan, something like that.
Kapitunan.
I think, yeah, Kapatununan. I think it's World Kapatununan, Sikran World Kapatununan. So it is a family term, and the closest at the time they translated was brotherhood, which I was talking to Geronimo's one of Geronimo's granddaughters about it, and she's like, she's an American, and she's like, but I spent time at the family house, and we were talking. And she's like, I got a little bit twisted on this. Of course, they're left coasters, so they got all twisted about, oh, it's a brother. What about the girls? And it's like, well, actually, it doesn't translate. And now we're talking about putting that in the education course so we understand and we can explain to people. Now, listen, this is not equal. This is the closest thing, but it's lost in translation. And I think a lot of times when Remy would say things, people didn't get it because we would talk about checking hands, and I had people looking for chickens around the room. Oh, we will do the chicken hands. What did we do? What the chicken? And Eddie, Chris, you must poke me with the dagger. How many times do poke versus poke and stuff like that are just plain old lost in translation? We were used to listening to Japanese accents and Chinese accents, depending on the state you're in, but you didn't have that diversity. Now, I mean, it's easy. Just pull out Google Translate. I was talking to Brazilians while we were here, and I pulled out the app, and we started talking via the app. And Remy didn't have that. He came over in the 70s. So I think there's a cultural thing to please people. That's a cultural thing.
Yeah,
and
again, 25. I think he was definitely trying to please some folks. Yeah.
but that's a cultural thing.
Yeah, yeah, I
Well,
understood.
well, no, not please. He didn't want to leave anybody out, but a lot of
Or
those guys were
or not hurt anybody's feelings, and yeah.
some of those guys were already gone.
Some
And that's
were
the thing.
gone, but some of them were also regional, to get back to what Chris was saying about how the organizations weren't set up clearly or cleanly.
Even before he passed, yeah.
Yeah, so by having his regional players and people involved, he figured that then they could get together.
And that would be an endorsement for guys in different areas.
Yeah.
Okay, so hey, you look at Germany. You had Gabrielle and Dieter. All right, so then they're in the will. So now if you're in Europe, these are two of the people you pop. Okay, in the Philippines, well, there's only one that was Roland Dantes. Shashir flew around. He's more Florida and Vancouver.
Yeah, Canada.
But
yeah.
Yeah, he goes back and forth to the three places, but the only one that was a permanent resident of the Philippines was Roland Dantes, and he didn't will it to his kids. They got the estate. The students got the martial arts, which, but of course, they made a run for it too because the estate disappeared overnight. But that's another topic.
Wow.
That's part two.
So, Rich, in your opinion, if he had set up regional, so let's just say, well, he had 25 something people in there, so I don't know how many regions he could have set up, or 20. I don't know how many regions he could have set up, but like, do you think it would have made a difference? Like, what do you think? In other words, I guess what I meant, how do you think it could have been set up where we wouldn't be seeing what we're seeing today? Is it possible?
Yeah, it was possible. He gave out state directorship or Midwest directorship, but he did it to multiple people, so it became confusing because either somebody went in a different direction or they just weren't coming around anymore. But yet they still held on to that certificate and said, "No, I'm that person.
Oh,
you can't take that away from me." Well, you were at that time, but they gave it to the next person who was doing the work, right? So if there was a booklet that was maintained, even if it was loose leaf and hand typed, and you could make photocopies for $25 or whatever at camps and get the updates, right? Then maybe there might have been a way to communicate that to people. But it was difficult. Like, if he saw how I had organized a bunch of stuff in the spreadsheets back in the 80s, he says, "I love this. Let's do this." He took it, went to the next region he was in, and they said, "This isn't the way we use it. We don't use that term. We don't teach it in this order." So it wasn't the invented here mindset, because he had taught it in a different order in a different location, or he used a slightly different term that resonated with that school versus our school. So there were some subtlety differences that people would immediately pick on and say, "Well, there's one little difference, so it's all got to be wrong." Versus, let's look at the commonalities and then start from there, right? And clarify the differences as we go forward.
Gotcha.
But egos were involved. But if he would have just come out and said it and said, "Nope, this person's doing this or that person's doing that," it might have changed things. But then again, he might not have had as large of a following as well.
Hey, do you mind if I jump in? Because I'm going to have to go to my gate soon.
Okay.
So, listen, while Remy was alive and healthy, it was all set. He followed the numerical rank. It made sense. I was senior man at most of the events. I was, I was the top ranked American, and I would bow everyone in. I would bow everyone out. I led the warm ups. I would teach the seminar or the forms. You'd have me teaching disarms and stuff like that. Whoever was the highest ranked person on point, Remy did this. And then when Remy got sick, there was a subgroup that did some weird shit, and they followed no sense because they completely ignored numerical rank. And that's what fell apart, And I think it all stems, in my opinion, it started with Randy Shea. but a lot of people. Well, there's 6 other people that went down the road with it,
Mm.
and Brett Salafia was Remy's attorney, and every time at these meetings when the Masters of Tappy got together, Brett would talk about the will, and then they would call him a troublemaker. The thing here is when I was with Germany, like I said, I was with Remy in Germany when he was diagnosed. He offered to promote me again. So what rank would that have been? I was already the highest ranked American.
Right.
But then he had a brain tumor that affected his mental state. So, and all these claims, were I mean, I could go through the timeline of what happened and how it all happened, but this is not what the show is. The thing here is people suck. People are going to do bullshit, underhanded things. We've seen it. It can keep going. If you follow what was going on, like if Remy would have been around 5 more years, none of this shit would have happened. It would have been a completely different scenario. But while he was alive, listen, I would go when I met Bruce. He was the top guy ranked there until I walked in the room. Okay, and then we were down at the Tucker, Georgia camp, and he was running things, and then Remy had me take over. But the thing here is, he followed the protocol, and so did everybody else. We knew who was who. We knew exactly who was what rank in the room, and he followed that protocol. With Rich, you were around a lot of these seminars. Did he follow the numerical rank protocol while he was healthy?
Yes, there was one exception.
Oh,
When he did joint locks, he always found the biggest person in the room.
Well, that was to drop the hammer. And you and I used to get the crap kicked out of us because we were the animals. But the thing here is, while Remy was alive at all these seminars, whoever was the top ranked person in the room in his art,
Yes,
was the go-to. And the thing here is, many times I would go to events and people would line up to ask me questions when they couldn't get to Remy.
Yep.
Tim, how do you do the technique? How do you do this disarm? How do you, in the forums, they were always lining up to see me at the forums because I was the one that was teaching the forums all the time. And I hate using the forums as the example, but I mean, but the thing was, when I showed up, people had questions. They came to me and Professor, not just Professor.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for a fact, I've seen them do it with other people when I was coming up and I was the junior and I saw some of my seniors at the time and Remy, and people would go to them to ask the questions. He followed that protocol. And then unfortunately, shit hit the fan when he was sick, and a bunch of people kept people away from Remy, and they couldn't get near him.
So, man,
but I'm gonna get ready. I'm gonna listen to you guys for a minute or two, and then I'm gonna head out. But listen,
hey,
wait a minute. You don't want to see the ceiling here. There's a ceiling, and there's my lounge.
It's a beautiful airport.
Oh my God,
okay. Atlanta. But it's nice being in the Delta Lounge. Not that I'm I'm not going to be bougie, but there we go, gold status. There you go.
Oh my gosh. Well, hey, thank you for dropping in and joining us.
Thanks for having me in. Hey, Chris, are you coming in? Are you coming in October still?
Send me the dates because
I will send them.
Yes, send me the dates because
I know April you can't because you're doing that camp.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, guys.
All right. Hey, when you get back in town, give me a ring.
I'll be home Monday. Oh, actually, I'll be in Florida Thursday.
Oh, all right. Well, then I'll wait
I get home tomorrow. I do laundry, and 6 o'clock I head down to Orlando.
Oh, it must be rough. All right. Well,
hit me up if you're in Orlando.
I'm 2 days, and I'm flying back to Buffalo Saturday night.
No. Okay.
But I'll give you a holler. I'll have Janice with me.
Okay.
See ya.
All right.
How do I X out of this thing?
I got you.
Okay.
Dean will kick you out.
Yeah,
Give me the boot.
They can hold me Monday when you get done.
It's the hook.
Here's the boot. Give him the boot.
Hook.
Get a hold of me Monday when you get back then.
All right. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye. Okay. So,
we've been going for almost 2 hours.
Oh, no. I knew it was going to be a good one. We kind of digressed there for a bit, but kind of, there.
Kind of. That's the fun stuff. That's why we're here. We're out just having a conversation.
Yeah. No, I thought it was great. Well, Chris, you got any final thoughts or based on anything that Tim said or anything?
Not so much off of what Datu said, but just going back to the idea of the conversation that Master Rich posted or said. And I think there's one thing we didn't really talk about as much is that like whatever whatever the Grandmaster's wishes are, everyone should try to follow them. I mean, that's just fair and respectful. I
Agreed.
mean, that's
Agreed.
whatever it is. Let's say he does pick someone to lead that you don't like. Give it a try. See what happens. Don't just throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, like if my dad up and died tomorrow and suddenly I'm the guy in charge, do I expect his black belts to stay with me forever? No, I expect them to make their own decision. But don't just leave because he's dead. You know, stick it out, see what I end up doing, or better examples of anyone else, obviously, but just like that's just a quick example I thought of. We need to still try to adhere to what the wishes were and the ideals were before.
100%.
Yeah.
My dad, when I first made the Instagram, I was talking to him. I was like, well, Dad, what should we put? And he says, we are a school that tries to embody and share Remy Presis's ideals. That's what he wanted us to do. That's what he, and not just his ideals, but now we're going to go into the other odds part of what the ideals were that my dad perceived them to be, or what Remy told him at the time what his ideals were. Because Remy might have had different wishes for different people, you know? But what he told my father was to go and spread my art and learn as much as possible. So that's what I do. I go and spread his art and learn as much as possible. Someone else, it might have been, hey, I don't know, hypothetically, Professor, or, you know, better example, GM Bram. Grandmaster Bram was told by Professor to focus on the knife. That's what he did. So, you know, we have to try to follow the wishes of the guys who came before us and at least give them a shot before we just up and leave.
Selfishness behavior, you know, personal
And also,
agendas,
and also, I'll throw this out there: you don't have to stay. You don't have to stick around. If you don't like the direction your art is currently going, then go. You know, I didn't like the direction my sensei was going, so I quit. I quit my job. I've never not had a job except for that one brief moment in my time where I was unemployed for 6 months, and it was the scariest time of my life because I had no income. But I knew that I had to leave or was going to turn violent between him and I. Like we were verbally fighting all the time, and he taught me how to spar. So at some point we were going to go to the ring again, and it was going to be bad. So I quit before that happened.
Yeah, good thing. Yeah, sounds like it was a good thing.
But if you want to quit. No one's got a gun to your head saying follow me.
Yeah, no.
Do this because you love doing it, and that's the most important thing. Professor and
Following Chris.
Say again.
I'm following Chris.
Hey, I mean, I'm pretty fun. I can cook some good rice. You'll be fed well. But one of the things I know Professor said a lot to the OGs who've told me this, and it's in a couple of his videos that I've saved, the most important thing for him was to enjoy life. If you're not enjoying this, then don't do it.
No, well said. Yeah, right. I mean, it's supposed to be fun at the end of the day, right? I mean, and if it's starting to become where it's not or toxic, yeah, you should be looking for something, another outlet or something else to do for sure.
Yeah. Go do fencing. Go swim. Go knit. Go do something that gives your life happiness. We're psychopaths and we find happiness hitting each other with sticks.
You know, and it's always going to be a problem discussing that. Yeah, it's just too bad, Dave. And good to see you here, Dave, as well. Rich, any final thoughts from you?
No, I think we've covered most of it. Once again, if anybody wants to reach out to ask me detailed questions about anything I've discussed here, please feel free. I'm open to further discussion.
Yeah. And Danny,
I have a question, Dean.
Yes.
Can we do a more toxic episode with me and Rich again on when to leave systems?
When to leave systems? Yeah,
when to leave them.
Or what to look for, or I guess the signs or the what is perceived as a toxic environment. I mean,
it comes off as a joke, but it's also a very important topic that, like, I don't think enough people know when to leave because they're, especially in the martial arts community, we're so blinded by loyalty sometimes. We'll stick it out no matter what. When it's like, no, if the guy's stealing money from you, leave. If he's being a jerk, leave.
I've stuck around blindly out of loyalty. I can I could tell you that. I've been in that.
How many of us have done that where we just stayed because we thought, oh, we must bow and
Oh,
kowtow
we
to
all.
our sensei
You know what it is,
because we
though?
think it's what we're supposed to do.
I think there's all like pieces of the journey that we have to go through to truly find where we want to be. You know what I mean? I
Absolutely.
mean, because of course there's some very lucky folks that right off the spot, their first place was phenomenal. It was a perfect match, fit. You know, it addressed
And
all
even
what
if
they
it is
wanted in
green,
their
it can
game.
grow
But
into a bad spot.
yeah, or it could, right. But some of us, I think that's part of the journey we've gone through. We had to go through these potholes to truly find like what we want. And through that, we took those experiences and it's shaped us. So I don't, when I look back at those situations that weren't the most pleasant or stuck around for just not the right reasons, it's still there was still
Yeah.
value out of it,
Yeah.
That's also coming from your perspective of being a grown up and looking at, no, I learned something here. And
Yeah.
my dad, he only had like two instructors, his kung fu instructor, and obviously, Remy was his main one. But like, he's told me, like, topic could be like, what's worth sticking it out for? Because he complained about Remy. A lot of guys complained about Remy, I'm sure,
You
but
know,
they
it'd be a
still
good thing to
stuck with
do.
him because the pros outweighed the cons. Because Remy would tell my dad all the time, or my dad would say the first person to admit he wasn't a saint was Remy. Remy had his flaws, but people still saw the value in sticking with
Yeah,
him,
they
even though
obviously
there
saw
were
more
some several
value.
flaws.
Sure. But you know, it might be a good episode with you guys if you want to do that. Bring a female along too, though. Because I tell you, obviously there's issues that we go through, it might not be the best fit or school or the blind sense of loyalty when it's not really helping us in our journey or we're not becoming the best version of ourselves in this environment. But imagine what some of the women are going, you know what I mean?
That's a very valid point, Dean.
That'd be a good episode.
Not to say I'm not interested, but if you're going to bring at least a woman on, then maybe you reach out to some of them and you have a little bit less of the gray-haired old guys on the board with them. Meaning,
Yeah,
you're
I got
the
a couple
one.
gray hairs.
Chris is a little bit younger, and so if you got one or two, so now it's two women, two guys. They don't. It's not going to feel like you're not putting somebody at a disadvantage
Yeah.
for numbers.
No, it's a good point, but that might be a good episode there where, giving them, having them voice if they experience anything and kind of letting,
Well, and the triggers that they've found and seen over time.
yeah, like and letting future potential female students, kind of giving them, the do's and don'ts and what to look for and stuff.
I can text a female FMA martial artist as soon as we're done, and I guarantee she'd want to do it.
So who's
You've
that?
had her on the show before, Dean.
Okay. Yeah. Let me know. Let me know. But I think that could be something interesting. You know what I mean? For sure. Yeah. But all right. Hey guys, I really appreciate it. I hope I didn't keep you too long. I know Datu asked to come on and sing in airport. I probably should have told him no, but when he said he was
I got to be up at work in 5 hours.
he's saying in the airport, I kind of felt bad. So, what time you gotta get up?
We have for those who don't know, I'm a manager at a Chick-fil-A, and I always open up, and we have a lot of orders in the morning. So I'm going to be there at like 4:30.
Oh my God, we gotta get you out of here, man. I'm sorry.
I'm willing to do it though. I don't care.
Oh, all right. Well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to keep you so long. I'm sorry.
I'm always down to talk to you guys. You know that. And Master Rich was great to finally actually talk to you some more.
Very good, Chris. Thank you, sir.
All right, guys. Well, hey, we'll obviously be in touch some shape, way, or form. And but hey, thank you guys, and you guys have a good night. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Later, everyone.
All right, take care.
Bye, everyone.
Go Chick-fil-A.
You
Hey,
ever come to
be in touch,
Orlando?
right?
I got you.
All right. All right, folks, that wraps up 467. Who is next? Thursday night, 52 blocks. We're having Light Burley, guy that's apparently going around, really kind of brought it back to the forefront, from what I understand, in the early 2000s. Kind of dropped off in the 90s and kind of brought it back, went to different parts of the States to really talk to folks and apparently worked. At any rate, though, he is coming on Thursday. He's going to talk about it, the history, why it went away kind of in the 90s, why it got a resurgence in the 2000s, and what we're seeing today. And he's really going to come from the defensive structure of it and how it ties into boxing. So it should be pretty interesting. So yeah, that's going to be Thursday at 7 o'clock. Again, light burly, 52 bucks. So if you're not doing anything, you're bored, check us out. Test run tomorrow at 7. All right, folks, thanks for jumping in. Comments, questions, all the above, and I will see you hopefully Thursday.